Snow falling over endless white sand, and a tower made of glass.
Hello, this is Signals and Light, a video essay channel dedicated to analyzing the formal principles and aesthetic philosophy of game design, narrative, and media. In this video, I'm delivering an analysis of a new 2023 actual play podcast called Worlds Beyond Number. The podcast is produced by Fortunate Horse, who also produces Rude Tales of Magic, Oh These Oh Stars of Space, and Fun City. It's made by a handful of very well-known creators in the actual play medium, including Brennan Lee Mulligan, Abria Iyengar, Erica Ishii, Lou Wilson, and Taylor Moore. If you didn't already know, actual play is a form of improv storytelling where a group of performers come together to tell improvised stories using the tools of games like Dungeons & Dragons and turning that into a show. However, it's not always just playing a game around a table in the literal sense. Often, as with this podcast, the creators turn the outcome of the improvised story into a highly refined audio or video product with editing, audio production, and more to enhance the experience. This first campaign of Worlds Beyond Number, called The Wizard, the Witch, and the Wild One, is set in an epic fantasy setting with inspirations from things like D&D, classic Western fantasy, Irish folklore, and Studio Ghibli movies. It's got a mix of lighthearted and incredibly dramatic moments, with a big focus on both celebrating storytelling and enhancing the experience with sound design and music cues that are at a quality parity with really highly polished audio dramas, more akin to a movie or a TV show, but in the audio form. So this is an awesome podcast that's going to get really popular really fast.
I can't even begin to tell you. The ball is rolling up the hill.
And some people might be wondering, why is it so popular? The podcast was already in the top 20 Patreons before any public content had launched, and it entered into the top 10 just recently as I was making this video. In this video, I'm going to analyze what I think Worlds Beyond Number is doing that sets it apart in the overall medium of actual play. While the immediate success of the Patreon is due to the prior fame of its creators, its continued success will, I believe, be on its own merits, as it has some really specific strengths that will make it broadly appealing. But, why is this video so long? Well, for one, long-form content for long-form content lovers. But really, it's because I'm offering a bunch of analysis of actual plays in general. Specifically 5 others that are most related to this one. Many of my points about this specific podcast discuss the formal nature of actual play, its aesthetics, how it works, and what it means to be a performer in this medium. The best way to properly contextualize all of that analysis is to contrast this show to some other major shows that I watch and listen to. So my hope here is that this video will be compelling to anyone curious about what actual plays are, whether you listen to them or not. A lot of fans of actual plays don't listen to every show, and there's probably some shows I talk about here that maybe you haven't tried out yet. If you finish this video as a fan of actual plays, I think you'll see that it's something you could maybe share with folks who might need a deep second opinion about that thing you keep bothering them to get into at least once a month. We all do it. This video will cover the 3 preview episodes of Worlds Beyond Number that they released before the show's official release. I won't spoil anything beyond a couple small scene snippets for examples, because I'm talking much more about the way the show works than what the story is about. But if you already know you'll enjoy the show, perhaps return to this when you're caught up on the first couple of episodes. I hope you stick around to listen to a person who just absolutely adores actual play content talk about what it is, what it's doing, and why this entry is so exciting for so many of us. Worlds Beyond Number features
your humble Dungeon Master, Brennan Lee Mulligan. With me, as always, are our Intrepid Heroes. Say hi, Intrepid Heroes!
Hi, Intrepid Heroes!
Hell yeah!
the Dungeon Master of Dimension 20, and who's guested on a lot of other actual play podcasts and shows.
I feel totally lost. I don't know what I'm supposed to do anymore. I'm sorry.
What do you think about that feeling? What do you think about the feeling that you don't know what to do?
I feel like I need to fix it.
Then you're still lost. Okay, I'm going to summon a frittata for myself.
A beautiful fucking frittata appears in your hand.
The notable start to Brennan's career was at College Humor, where he's well known for his unhinged CEO skits and other work, and he's still frequently featured in other Dropout content. But he's best known for Dimension 20 and possibly to some people the little short campaign and Critical Role called Calamity.
Everything feels slow. There's movement and there's heat, but the only noise you can hear, despite all this chaos, is breath. It's yours, but it's also a stranger's. It's like someone else is using your body to breathe.
We have
your highborn Fae DM, Abria Iyengar,
who's also been in a lot of actual play content, often a player in a bunch of games, including on D&D Beyond, as well as Dimension 20.
She's always studied the stars and has found peace in feeling dispersed into a universe that's infinitely big. And she reaches for that instead. And I think in that moment, she takes a step. I would like to use my wild-shaped starry form. And she steps forward and her form completely turns into stars.
And then she's been a featured DM in both Critical Role and Dimension 20 seasons as well.
And see a shattered 20-foot-tall set of pillars encircling a tremendous sight.
She clearly has like more of a DM bias as her career has evolved, I think. And we will obviously see her DMing in Worlds Beyond Number, though Brennan is the current DM. We also have
Erika Ishii. I'm an actor and you might know me from the internet or from one of many video games.
They've guested as a player character in everything I'm aware of. They're often chaotic, charismatic, charming characters across a spectrum of shows.
Well, what's it about?
It's about romance and drama. You see, we met when I was performing here in this beautiful little town of Transylvania.
They were one of the main cast members of Vampire the Masquerade, LA by Night.
X asked me why I can't walk away from the cause. And I stumbled out something. I just can't. I feel like the Annabelle of even a year ago would have had such an easy answer. Because we can do better. Because we are better than this. And I believe that.
And I think in the future, as well, is going to be a game master in this, as they've established they want to rotate all of them being game masters with different game systems and stories in this podcast. Lastly, we have
Lou Wilson?
I'll take it.
Who's primarily been an actual play player in Dimension 20 specifically.
I took 40 pennies from an old woman who I thought was just some old woman, but turned out to be the witch.
Sometimes it feels like there's not one real beggar in these lands.
They're out here to get us, you know?
Yes.
We're living well, right? And they want this life.
Yes.
They want what we have.
Now, you are, of course, actually rich because...
so rich.
He's guested in a few other things, but Dimension 20 is his main thing until now. Like Brennan, he also got his career started with College Humor, and he's a returning guest in a variety of their sketches and shows. He's also pursued some more conventional Hollywood work, including a role in the films King of Staten Island and becoming the announcer on Jimmy Kimmel Live. But I think with him and everyone else in this group, they're finding they can make full career paths out of creating actual play content where they can engage in a confluence of roles simultaneously as actors and storytellers and improvisers. So, the first 3 preview episodes of Worlds Beyond Number is they've cut up 3 episodes, and each one introduces one of the 3 characters of their first campaign called The Wizard, the Witch, and the Wild One. So we start with the Wizard, and we have a 1-hour episode. The 1-hour episodes are each split into 2 halves, where the first half is part of this Patreon exclusive campaign.
Now, the Children's Adventurer is going to be available all as a piece. It's a 16-plus hour-long campaign of us essentially building our characters and beginning our adventure and giving glorious context, rich texture to the world and to the characters and their relationships.
That is so cool, and there's so many amazing opportunities, both in terms of storytelling and like D&D specifically through the lens of a child's eyes, that are like really fascinating and not something I've heard in any other one of these shows. And then the second half of the episode is the adult campaign, and that's going to be in their public feed. That's what people can subscribe to through podcast apps, whatever you use to listen to podcasts. And so you get this little intro to them as a child, and then you get the intro to them as an adult, and you can sort of immediately see the connections between backstory and present. So we have these 3 episodes: The Wizard, The Witch, and The Wild One, Then and Now. That's what's out as of the time of me recording this, though any further content to be released after this won't have a huge impact on any of the analysis I'm doing here, other than I'm pretty sure to just further demonstrate the points I'll be making. I gotta admit, everything but this intro and the outro was actually unscripted, making this essay a little bit less academically refined than future content I want to make. You'll see tons of clips, tons of references, and a lot of detail about the topic. I'm not just rambling off the cuff. I have a lot to say because I've been thinking about this topic a lot for many years. But let's just say it's meta, that the analysis that I'm doing is improvised, and I'm also talking about an improvised story format. Worlds Beyond Number is really something that is built upon a legacy of things like it, and if you've been part of an audience of that legacy as it's been building up, it's easier to see like exactly why it is as good as it is. I think if somebody jumped into Worlds Beyond Number having not watched Critical Role or Dimension 20, you could be misled about what types of things these shows are doing on like a technical level.
Because you're coming in with an expectation of, oh, I'm going to see people play a game, and all of a sudden you don't see them, quote unquote, play that game or play the game as you anticipated, all of a sudden it's like going into a movie thinking it's a comedy, but realizing it's a drama. It's like,
God.
Like, I'm sure this is a good movie, but that wasn't what I was in for. I was ready to laugh, and now I've got to cry. I'm not in a cry mood.
Worlds Beyond Number, along with other Fortunate Horse shows, is trying to turn actual play into a high production quality audio performance with a lot of editing, ambiance, and music, even though the actor's performance is technically improvised.
A narrative show focuses way more on emotional and narrative momentum for the listener than a high fidelity representation of what happens at a table, no matter how good that table is. The more you are cutting from your show, the higher the chances you're going to do narrative play. The less rules you have, higher chances you're focusing on narrative play. And here's a big one. If you're adding content to the show, if you are adding copy, if you're adding really like big emotionally, not just music beds, but I mean like music cues, you're trying to manipulate the audience's emotion with post-production,
right?
The closer you get into narrative play. Like all those things sort of nudge you one direction on a spectrum.
You can see this sort of thing more often outside of actual play, such as in audio dramas and improv storytelling shows, though there are a couple other examples of this in actual play, like in Dark Dice by Fool and Scholar Productions. There's some other things they're doing on a narrative and creative, like what it means to create a story improvisationally as a group. They're meaningfully trying to push that type of performance forwards and draw a special and meaningful focus on distributing the effort of collaborative story across the full cast of players and GM working together. I'll be digging more into that after this section that's describing actual plays as a whole, so if you're only interested in that analysis, you can use the section breaks to skip past this discussion of other actual plays, but many of the points later are going to be made in contrast to these other shows specifically. It's hard to convince people to listen to actual play because, one, it's weird. It's a thing they haven't heard before. They're not sure if they will enjoy this exotic people playing a game in audio format. And it's also really long. There's long episodes. It requires a large time investment. In some cases, an untenable time investment. It's longer than, just a 30-minute TV show. To even see if you like one episode, you're investing into something as long as or slightly longer than a movie. And as it is with media content, time is sort of a commodity for a lot of people. So there's these things that make it hard to convince people to get into actual play content. But I think a lot of people who would be interested in the last few years have already they're like smelling the allure of this thing. They can tell that it's got like millions of fans and they're like, I've met a lot of people that want to get into this stuff, but they just haven't like taken the jump in to do so. I would argue if you like video games, if you like Dungeons & Dragons, if you like fantasy, sci-fi, storytelling, you're obviously going to like actual plays. So I watch and listen to a lot of actual play content. We've got Critical Role, Vampire the Masquerade LA by Night, Dimension 20, Not Another D&D podcast, Rude Tales of Magic, Oh These Those Stars of Space. I also listen to Hello from the Magic Tavern and Mission to Zix, and those aren't in the actual play space, but they're relevant to bring up because I think ultimately they're doing something similar where you have a group of improv actors who are pretending to inhabit a world in order to tell a story. The interesting thing about things like Hello from the Magic Tavern and Mission to Zix is they don't have rules, obviously. They're not rolling dice and they're not playing a game, as it were.
I would argue that because I was in some of the same classes as them, the game they are playing is long-form improvisation.
Oh yeah, I mean, long-form improv is built around the idea of the game of a scene. It's just you don't happen to have dice.
Exactly. So yeah, the game doesn't have dice, but it does have rules of thumb and best practices and certain techniques that they use. So, but they would say they're not playing a game. But you know, I mean, then we're getting into the philosophy of what makes a game and what is a game, and I don't know.
They also, because of that, tend to stay in character or like try to stay in character throughout the entire episode. If they ever say something out of character, it's kind of like played as a bit where they're also technically in character, even though they're clearly breaking character and laughing and reacting in a way that a character wouldn't react in that situation.
Is it possible that Usador loves Mayor Manana too much?
It's a real JonBenet Ramsey situation here.
I suppose it is possible. I could.
Do you have JonBenet Ramsey on Earth?
What is that?
I don't want to talk about what it is on Earth.
Oh,
Go ahead, just do it.
It's a sentient beignet named John Ramsey. John Beignet Ramsey.
But they're always trying to quote-unquote stay in character, and the thing that's really different about actual play content is this fascinating tension between the players being an audience and the players being characters and helping to mold the story. And I'm going to talk a bit more about that when I talk about Worlds Beyond Numbers specifically, because there's this fascinating thing happening there that I think Worlds Beyond Number is going to connect with more people through the lens of how these players and this specific group of people are reacting to the reality that they're both audience and storyteller. Everything I'm going to be talking about in this video regards actual play, not just Worlds Beyond Number, but like the nature of how actual play works. So all of these other shows that I listen to, they all have different strengths and weaknesses and things that they're doing very differently from each other as actual play products. Interestingly, just like in any media, there are different like subgenres basically being formed in the specific approach that the group of people has about what kind of actual play storytelling they're going to do. And so I'm going to go over 5 of the actual plays that I listed earlier. These are some of the biggest shows in the medium, and of course there are other big shows, but some or all of the cast here has appeared in every single one of these shows. I'll cover the goals of these shows, like how they approach their tone, structure, and content, and then I'll use that as a jumping off point to contrast the approach that we see in Worlds Beyond Number. That said, I feel obligated to acknowledge to fans of actual plays who might be watching, comparing and contrasting can be a bit dangerous. I don't plan to make critical review videos on this channel because I feel a lot of anxiety getting involved in discourse about subjective experiences, even if I really like talking about things critically with my friends and family. I'm sure many of you can relate to the feeling that saying basically any opinion at all on the internet can lead to a lot of really unhealthy interactions. We all love our favorite shows, we all love our blorbos, and for many people, Worlds Beyond Number won't appeal at all, or it won't matter to them as much as their own favorite personal shows. When I talk about other shows here, I'm trying my best to focus on their most basic formal elements, particularly with regards to story structure and tone. There's a million and one things I don't say about their stories and themes and players in this video, but the central qualities of Worlds Beyond Number that I'm the most interested in discussing and analyzing are tied to how it approaches story structure and presentation specifically, so that's what I'm focusing on. I love every other show I watch and listen to, and if I had more time than this video belies, I could make an essay this long and detailed about every single one of them. And of course, 1,000,000%, some people won't feel the things that I feel here. Such as art, baby. So Critical Role, for instance, I would describe as a simulation-focused, D&D game-focused actual play.
What's in the store?
But you see, there is a tire that holds the regal kind of shoulder shelf display that a lot of noble houses in Wildmount might hold. You can see there is an element of Nordic furs that draw from Isilra and Othensia. You can see there are a large swath of Marquesian inspirations from all across the continent. Things from a beautiful jama coat tailored for the female form that has like the high collar and the fold over in the front, sleeves that bunch up towards the middle forearm for cuffing at the end, just a beautiful dress that kind of flows up from there. You can see all different designs of Sherwani coats, also themselves from the short collar in the front and a long button in the front, tailored well and tight to the torso that rests almost where the end of the thigh is. You can see there are minor cloaks and display designs. There are even pins and sashes that can be customized as well with all manner of trim that are available to place upon them. What is it that you are considering for your character?
So my piece of advice is, whatever you're looking for, make sure that even though it's lovely, it's still you.
It's meant to evoke the sense of if you were sitting at a table at home, playing D&D, rolling dice, playing with figures, having 4-hour sessions, having really sprawling, kind of erratic, gamey-like storytelling where you're getting quests and you're getting side quests and you're having to keep track of all these different things you're doing. And Critical Role isn't really preoccupied with telling like a super perfectly paced story or a perfectly encapsulated story like a TV show. But despite that non-rigid structure, they still do care immensely about dramatic and comedic storytelling. They care a lot about character. They care a lot about giving good performances, but arguably the format of a D&D game is of one of the highest priorities in the pillars of what matters to them in storytelling. It's got a lot of episodic storytelling where they go on little individual quests, sometimes things that don't have anything to do with each other. Character arcs in Critical Role often sort of take place over really long time spans, like within the game it's happening over months. In reality, it's happening over years. And in some cases, character arcs for characters in Critical Role will be like planted in the first few episodes, and then you won't even see that seed grow until like 30 or 40 episodes later because that character wasn't immediately relevant to the story of events of the game. The players are playing D&D as like game players. They're making like spur of the moment radical decisions that could in some cases send the players literally traveling thousands of miles to another country out of the blue. There's one beat in the second campaign of Critical Role where they spontaneously end up into a series of goofy events that makes them steal a ship.
The figures all of a sudden all stop and turn as well as the ones talking about. They all look in the
I use
direction.
thaumaturgy to make a dolphin sound.
It seems to not assuage their fears and more just make them more worried and curious as to what's happening. You watch as the two figures there start looking over towards the initial figure that you were following and are looking really aggressive.
I turn to Caleb and I go, there! I threw our engagement ring and our life and I fed it to the rabies dolphins. My mom was right. I never should have gotten involved with you.
Piss off!
Hey, you know what? You piss off, okay?
Closes his fist. Oh no. 3 arrows get loosed from the ship in your direction. His hand comes down, gives a quick shot of his shoulder. Come on! Take them out, they've seen too much!
And because they've stolen the ship and the guards are like chasing them, suddenly they're leaving this city and going off on an ocean voyage.
Well done, guys, you have a boat.
It ends up derailing what the story is currently about to make the story about something else.
We're going in a completely different direction, now we're pirates!
You're going to end up with a lot more chaos in that format, and a lot of people love that. There's like a huge audience of people who say, I only want D&D actual play that feels like I could sit at the table and actually play this game. I would say LA by Night is specifically preoccupied with a very simulation focus as well, but in the vampire world and in the Vampire the Masquerade system. The Vampire the Masquerade system is inherently a bit more story and narrative focused than Dungeons & Dragons is by design. So you get a little bit less of the like erratic side questy exploration of the world, but they still have like so many things going on that it's not like a television-like pacing to a story. Vampire the Masquerade LA by Night is very serious and very dramatic.
When it was finally explained to me what I was and what I was supposed to be feeding on, how things were supposed to work, what I had initially been doing seemed more humane. I fed on the things that fed on others. But then that came with its own set of problems. That came with feeding on things that didn't die, that didn't forget, that knew what I was doing.
How did you determine that? How did you judge death to be their fate?
I waited to find people who hurt others,
Who kill others?
or other things, yeah.
It also has its own weird version of sardonic or chaotic humor, but it's often through this dark lens of incredibly bleak comedy.
This is the kind of party where kindred all get together and like to pretend we're not awful. And they like to pretend that being a vampire is all about being fancy and spending money and being popular and all the things that people like.
I mean, humans do that too.
I know, but humans, as a general rule, don't need each other.
I would say the story is a bit sprawling, but it does have more planned structural dramatic beats, and it puts the performances front and center. Players are always in full cosplay. The show even has these end of episode segments where characters play their roles in these scripted scenes rather than in a normal game context. So there's this clear effort to blur the line between an improvised actual play and a video drama. But even with that said, often LA by Night ventures more into exposition about the nature of vampire culture and the nature of the characters' relationships and like the day-to-day experience of being a vampire. And then another thing happening in LA by Night is there's a really strong focus on world building and what it means to live in a community and interact with that community on a political level. Also in like a kind of warlike level, because really vampire is about like the political and literal wars between vampire clans. So that show ends up having a lot more of a focus on character relationships and faction relationships and less of a focus on like an overall story arc with a clear beginning, middle, and end. And then when it comes to Not Another D&D Podcast, that's kind of similar to Critical Role in that it's trying to evoke a classical D&D campaign experience. But the group is very often focused on comedy and performance and making each other laugh and making the audience laugh. And because they're always focused on like interesting comedy story beats and interesting drama story beats, it ends up becoming a little bit less gamey than Critical Role. Like LA by Night, there is a large focus being drawn to performance and structure over game.
It would appear that Dr. Nebel was either some type of blade himself or was involved in their order in some way and has been destroyed in much the same way that the witch disappeared.
I am starting to get very worried for my witch.
And that's where we'll end our session.
Okay. Oh. But the D&D game DNA is still really important.
Let's see if you've got any strength in there.
I'm telling you, I do not.
He's going to try to drain strength from Henry. Oh boy, that's a 10. Once again, does not get any strength from Henry. Wow, I'm starting to feel bad for you, and I'm being a pure evil.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Welcome to the club. Everyone feels bad for me, including me.
NADPOD has these sprawling 100-episode campaigns just like Critical Role, but the episodes are 90 minutes, and Murph is not focused on simulating this really deep game world so much as simulating this really epic story. There are not really side quests. Every session plays like a blend between an episode of a TV show and a game of D&D. Also, even if they love making jokes and doing bits, the players are very much ready to move at this rapid speed between dramatic beats whenever Murph makes it clear that it's time to move on. DMs like Murph and Brennan have a tendency to be a little bit more directorial and say like, this is what's happening now.
Good luck, Top F.
Godspeed, butt half.
Butt half. Daddy self and butt half.
You see
really,
Sol and Bumpy
Webster's
are
dictionary needs to come to us.
Sol and Bumpy are bumping into things because Bumpy can't see as he walks down the hall. But yeah, kind of hanging on to Queen Umberspore. She's putting on a bit of a show, fighting up against you guys.
They have a tendency to try to drive the action forwards when they see a moment at which the action should be driven in the next scene. If you look at something like Dimension 20, they also care a lot about using Dungeons & Dragons to tell a story and play a game, but it's a little bit less about evoking the same feeling of literally sitting at a table to play with your friends at home. Every Dimension 20 season is anywhere between 6 episodes and like 18 to 20 episodes. Each season has a clear story arc that Brennan somewhat planned in advance, including set piece moments and story beats based off of things that he anticipates are going to happen throughout the arc that he's set up. And it also will have very specific character arcs for each character. Brennan is very focused on making sure that every player in the party has some kind of a cohesive character arc that plays out through the entirety of the season. And he's actually on record explaining that when he goes to create a story for a season, he does so after the players have created their characters.
The way you get around the fact that a shorter campaign, especially one with pre-built sets, especially one that needs to hit certain things at certain times, it doesn't have a lot of freedom to it, is essentially that you need rails, but it does suck for those rails to come from the Dungeon Master. So what you can do in a session 0 is do really definitive, deep character development and go, who are these characters? Which is, I think, a big part of doing planning as a Dungeon Master is, at least for me, what I use session 0s for is like, look, I have a small amount of time to get this done. I need to know everything about you because that's what the rails are going to be. The rails are going to be who you tell me you are.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So that way you grant this full degree of player agency and give yourself the ability to create rails that were designed by the players, right?
Yeah. It creates a story that folds each of those characters into the season and makes an encapsulated story for all of them, much like a TV show. Dimension 20, they're often focused on the performance and the story in a more scripted way. Some might think. A lot of people actually assume watching Dimension 20 that it's highly edited. In reality, it's not. They don't edit it that much. They have a live season that they did on Twitch, streamed live, and you can tell they're not editing that much out. But because they have so much more of a focus on like scene construction, telling a story that fits within a single season, having very discrete character arcs, and having very discrete story arcs, it comes across like it's more scripted because it's more focused on the nature of telling like a self-contained story. Rude Tales of Magic is then doing this whole other thing where it's really focused on surreal comedy storytelling. It's not focused on story arcs in the way Dimension 20 is, and it's not focused on simulation in the way Critical Role is, and it's not focused on comedy in the same way that NADPOD is. Rude Tales of Magic is really kind of about the intensity of surreal fantasy, and Branson Reese specifically really likes to honestly make his players suffer.
You hear the creaking of wood and a snap, and suddenly the worst thing you have ever seen crashes through the trees. A 12 by 20 wound emerges. A pulsating sack of bleeding, exposed flesh crawls towards you.
Okay, I
think I'm gonna turn around and just shoot a crossbow into it.
Yeah, go for it.
So I
You
roll
do
16.
hit it.
Yeah.
Yes, it goes right into it, and a high-powered stream of blood starts shooting out of it, and the arrow just sort of sticks there and begins to dissolve.
Oh my
I mean, you can tell me how much damage it takes.
Okay, take 6 damage.
Great.
Oh no.
Yeah.
Shit.
Like a little baby's arm forms out of it next to the wound. The arm sort of like moves itself and like puts its hand down to cover the wound and stop the blood. And the hand is sort of like absorbed back into it. The bleeding stops.
So a lot of the story arcs in Rude Tales of Magic are just bizarre, surreal escalations and constant divergences, forcing the players to never really be on track towards their current goal. And he just throws these surreal scenarios at the player, one after the other, after the other, after the other. And it's really evocative and it's really entertaining.
You get to the other side of this door. You enter into a Technicolor menagerie of flesh. The black glow of the tunnel is replaced by the cool and badass pink and yellow glow of a million bioluminescent flowers, which seem to move through the air in a flight pattern straight up stolen from the Mermation of Starlings. A 10-foot-tall hamster ball made entirely of goblins wheels by, powered by something internal that sounds to be struggling. You see reverse centaurs and beasts no god would name roaming the endless grounds. Fingers of all different shapes and sizes and species sprout up from the ground vulgarly. A sentient wooden hoop hits a little boy with a stick. The boy is fine. Don't send us emails about the boy.
But the nature of this surreal storytelling also means there's less of a focus on like a specific coherent story structure. He's aware very much clearly of story structures, and a lot of the divergences and surrealism that he brings to the media is, I think, very informed by an understanding of storytelling conventions and how stories normally work. A lot of his surrealism is an act against conventions. He's constantly trying to undermine and play with expectations, but he's doing so consistently that it ends up being a different format of storytelling. So, those are the 5 shows I've been the most preoccupied with that I think lay good groundwork for comparing to Worlds Beyond Number. I've listened to other shows. I know there's tons of other actual plays that are doing other things that I don't listen to, but everything I'm going to say about Worlds Beyond Number in this is really in contrast to these other actual plays I've been listening to over the last few years, and I can tell that Worlds Beyond Number is preoccupied with evolving the medium through a specific lens. There's a few things that are like immediately jumping out to me as I've been listening to these 3 episodes that are like constant explosions in my brain of,
oh, hell yeah!
This is wild.
I've experienced things like this before. Why is this striking me so much harder than everything else I've listened to that's like this? And I would say I had epiphanies similar to this one when I first got into actual play content. When I first started listening to Critical Role, I was immediately like, wow, this is something special. This is something new. They're so funny and they give such compelling performances in this improv format, and they get to tell such compelling stories in a format that is so fresh and different than anything else that you get on television or podcasts or whatever. But then somehow I have successively had these moments where I get into a new actual play thing that I think is elevating the medium, where I have this moment of like, okay, I already thought this was amazing, and now you're doing these extra things that suddenly are making it more amazing than I initially considered it. And each time that happens, I honestly get, because of a lot of very complex value systems I have that I cannot fit within this review, I get very almost confused, like, why does it make me feel so much more than something that I already thought was hitting the capacity of my excitement or joy in something like this? So I have to sit there and think about and break out piece by piece. What exactly are they doing in terms of acting, in terms of storytelling, in terms of technical execution of the medium that's making me freak out yet again that this is cool as shit that I can't believe is as cool as it is. So let's start with the high level stuff. The world, the story, the kind of storytelling that we're getting with Worlds Beyond Number. So I'd say Worlds Beyond Number is sitting in the same camp of Dimension 20, LA by Night, and NADPOD in terms of a hyperfixation on storytelling over just game playing, though I imagine structurally they'll have longer and more rambling seasons like NADPOD rather than the tightly structured seasons of Dimension 20. The show has really heightened drama, but it also has lots of comedy, of course. Everyone involved is absolutely hilarious, but I'd say it aims to highlight drama in a way that's a lot closer to LA by Night and other shows that try to be more like audio dramas. I'd contrast this the most heavily against Dimension 20, where Brennan and Abria also DM and everyone here is played. That show can be very serious, very tragic, and very dramatically enriched, but admittedly, it has a huge focus on improv comedy. You have this cast of college humor actors, they're all constantly doing bits, they love doing bits. You always have this flow from seriousness to joke very often with Dimension 20, and sometimes it's literally like penduluming between them.
The wind blows past. Away in the field, you see a lone farmer with a little plum satchel.
But because you have this constant tension between comedy and drama, where comedy is mostly winning,
you see that the farmer slips on some wet chocolate and a bunch of jelly beans fall out of his satchel. You hear, sort of off in the distance,
I slipped on some chocolate and dropped some jelly beans.
They can still focus on story immensely, but they do so through a lens where comedy as performance work is also incredibly important. Comedy bits can both undermine and enhance dramatic storytelling, but I would say that the tension between players being both characters and audience members in actual play definitely can make the comedy feel a bit more undermining than you see in scripted content. I would say Worlds Beyond Number has a larger reverence for drama, where the players might react as players comically to a dramatic moment.
You see, she says, "One moment, Ame," and she gets up in his grill. She's a little bit shorter than him, so she's got a
Yeah.
And she gets up in his grill and says, "So let me understand this. I am to carry this child, and I'm going to, and then with the threat of maybe dying one day and I'm going to carry that and go through all the pain of labor. And you're not willing to put a ring where the witch told you to put the ring. You're going to put the ring where she said." And he goes, "Okay, all right, okay." And you see he sort of holds it and stands there sort of looking dumbly for a moment and then says, he just starts sweating. Not during.
Did I stutter?
But they don't want to undermine the dramatic moment. They want to let the full buildup and release of drama occur without dispelling the magic that's being created by the GM. The best analogy I can think of is looking at a show like Steven Universe compared to a show like Rick and Morty. In the latter, there is an immense amount of drama, character exploration, and rich storytelling, but the comedic bits are constant, and on a meta level, they actually explicitly function to contrast to or actively undermine dramatic narrative conventions. I don't think Dimension 20 players are exactly in the same frame of reference of constantly doing meta comedy like seen in Rick and Morty, but it bears noting that one of them has literally written for that show. Steven Universe, by contrast, is full of comedy, comic reactions, over-exaggerated emotional beats, sarcasm, and whimsy, but more often than not, the comedy serves to complement the drama, to make each storytelling beat richer with contrasting tones. And that's the comedy story time space that Worlds Beyond Number inhabits. The comedy adds warmth to a story that will clearly still have many dark, somber, tragic, and serious moments. And after that huge divergence about comedy meeting drama, let me just say, when this show is being dramatic, oh boy, is it very dramatic.
As you run, you see lights moving through the sky, slowly at first and then faster. And you begin to realize how large this seaside town is that you are moving through. You only realize how large it is when the far reaches of it are illuminated in flame as they come roaring out of the black night and are only made visible in the moment of their destruction.
So Worlds Beyond Number is, like I said, using D&D. It's clearly a unique fantasy setting that they've come together to create themselves. I don't know how much of it is from Brennan specifically. I imagine in future Fireside Chats, we're going to see them talking about how this world came to be specifically, why this is the world they chose to use for their first game that they're running.
There's a lot of influences in this. There's magic and secrets and mystery and the world of spirits and empire and war and it's big stuff going on. But fundamentally, there's also a lot of like childhood nostalgia in this, in terms of like the Celtic fairy tales my mom read me as a kid, like Miyazaki movies that I would like watch over and over and over again. And just like Miyazaki has like, there's My Neighbor Totoro and then there's Princess Mononoke. So there's like even within that, there's a big tonal shift between his body of work, right? There's a lot of the old fantasy games I used to run, and there's a desire too to have this like ongoing years-long thing. And also, by the way, looking at the games my friends run, like looking at, you know, Taz with the McElroys, or NADPOD with Murph and Emily and Jake and Caldwell, Critical Role, like Matt and all the amazing players at Critical Role.
I would say it's fantasy through a very specific lens, Miyazaki movies, and I saw someone in the fan Discord say Final Fantasy games, and I can see both of those things present.
Your bowl haircut. Your bangs flutter as you touch the broom, and you hear, Ame! Why are you using the big broom?
Because it gets done faster.
Please use the brush and dustpan. Remember, I don't just have eyes in the back of my head.
What? What's the end of that sentence?
That's for me to know and you to find out.
It's interesting to get Miyazaki and Final Fantasy vibes from audio only, because those are such visual formats. I would say one of the things that makes you see it through like a Miyazaki or a Final Fantasy lens is there's this domesticity to the fantasy. There's this very lived-in, homey feeling. One of the characters, the witch, lives in a little cottage with her witch grandmother in the woods, and the way the cottage is described, the way the environment is described, the way they go about their little magical lives living in this cottage, you get this sense of normalcy, but like splendorous, mysterious, wonderful normalcy through the lens of a child experiencing magic, growing up isolated from society. Then, of course, one of the main characters is also a spirit. He literally was born amongst spirits. He's the child of this great bear spirit god, lives in the spirit world.
A cavorting, pawing, screeching, shouting cavalcade of fairies and spirits, entities of the great deep wood, tumble and somersault, flitter and flap, each of different shapes and sizes, cavorting and gallivanting amongst the steps of the great bear.
The way the things are described is so explicitly drawing your mind to the kinds of environments you see in something like Princess Mononoke. But then Brennan is bringing his own flavor to the table with fairy folklore and Western fantasy folklore type of feelings. And so you end up with this thing that's interesting, because Miyazaki and Final Fantasy are often taking fantasy from the West and filtering it into a fantasy of the East. And now we have a Western creators who take this Eastern fantasy that was inspired by Western fantasy, and now we're ending up with this whole new vibe that, you know, constantly is evolving fantasy media forwards. So we have this whimsical fantasy setting. A lot of details of it aren't clear to us yet, especially because the Child's campaign is from children's perspectives, and Brennan and the group are doing this really cool thing where they are only focusing on what a child would know, what a child would understand, larger things like politics or how anything of the world outside our immediate frame of reference would function, because that's what a child's life is. Even if they ask questions about the larger world, they'll never really have a full comprehension of the answers to those questions until they grow up and actually go live in that larger world. And that's clearly what the adult campaign is going to be about, is children who become, I think it sounds like, teenagers venturing off and becoming, you know, presumably heroes. So the world and setting are cool, very immersive immediately. The next thing I have to talk about is the sound design and the music.
In a minute. See if I still got it. Yep.
And the reason I have to talk about those contrasts to the world and story is so much of what allows your brain to really like fill out these cinematic, flourishing, beautiful details in the narration is the enhancement of the narration by both sound design and music. So a lot of podcasts, both actual play podcasts and improv storytelling podcasts, have been following a trend set by audio dramas over the past century, using sound design to make it feel like the characters are in a well-realized world. You'll get like little whooshes and whirs of doors opening in a sci-fi podcast.
Well, she changed your programming at the root level about it. Right, but it was a check and balance that keeps you from doing something incredibly dangerous to your ones and zeros.
Or it was a false barrier to self-improvement.
Anyway.
Like there's some safeguards that are in place for good reason.
Right.
Yeah, like the safety in my butt gun.
Sure.
A great
yeah,
example.
Absolutely. Perfect
really
example.
what
Thank
I was
you,
talking
AJ.
About, but yes, yeah. I'm just getting a sandwich.
Or you'll get like crickets chirping in the evening or a babbling brook.
Some time ago, the small pious village of Ilmater's Hope suffered a terrible season of blight. Crops blackened and animals ill beyond care, the men and women of the village spent much of their time far from town, collecting together what they could to feed their slackened mouths. Exhausted, but fed, the men and women of Ilmater's Hope slept well, and awoke to calming rays of the sun.
This all serves to make you feel like you're in the location with the characters as the story is happening. A lot of podcasts also have music. Some will just have generally more ambient music. Some will then start to bring in music cues in reaction to dramatic events. And then you have this use of music that is very dramatic and intentional that specifically Taylor Moore at Fortunate Horse started doing with Rude Tales of Magic.
Once again, you are bisected right at the waist as a claw comes down and pinches you in half. Now remember, your bottom half is a plastic lawn flamingo.
Rude Tales of Magic uses these music cues frequently to break up scenes and to like hit very specific dramatic beats of character realizations, of things that are suddenly happening, rising and falling action. The music functions like you would expect it to in a movie or a TV show that's using music a lot, and it really enhances the story, obviously, in the same way that it does in those media. So Taylor Moore is doing the same thing here, I would say with a little bit less of a focus on comedy. A lot of the music in Rude Tales of Magic exists to enhance the like absurd whimsy and surrealism of that world, whereas the music here is meant to enhance the mystical peacefulness, the domesticity, the like intrigue.
In the light of day, the glass of the body of the staff will seem sort of clear and radiant, reflecting sunlight from many angles. At night, a small helix of starlight, as though a small patch of the nighttime sky was encased within it, circles up to the top of the staff, which spreads into a pair of crystal wings containing a rounded sigil of the Citadel.
And also, he's doing an amazing job of like hitting these emotional beats where characters have an emotional reaction to something. The music dies down. You hear the character's heartbeat.
Ursula, you look out and see two adult women that you instantly recognize. Far off though they are, past 7 or 8 rows of seated spectators, standing and looking at you.
And the players are talking about their internal states and how they're reacting to each other emotionally.
Suvi is a rictus of, like, contempt for the form and confusion at what you're doing.
Ame, who had, prior to this, been enjoying herself quite a lot, feels looks as though her stomach has dropped out. I just aghast at the indignity of it all. And livid at these yokels booing her friend.
And the sound is just like suddenly perfectly matching the tone. So huge thumbs up to Taylor. The things that he's doing on both of these podcasts are hugely elevating the medium. I don't know if really he's been celebrated as much as he should within this larger format. You know, actual play podcasts and improv podcasts, I don't know if they have like awards or shows about them. I think most of the discourse around these things happens in fan communities and happens in these really isolated places. And the world outside of those places is like so completely unconcerned with the existence of improv storytelling that everybody just likes the things that they like and they talk about the things that they like and they recommend things that they like. But there's not always conversation about like what exactly are the standout things? What are like the really high bars that are being set from a technical perspective? And I just have to say Taylor Moore's music and sound effects in this and in Rude Tales of Magic are like bar none. I'm pretty sure the best in the format. There are definitely podcasts out there, both improv and not, that are delivering an equal quality, but equal to best is still the best. So great job. So there's one unique and special thing about Worlds Beyond Number that really stands out to me specifically. I don't know if everyone will grab onto this. I don't know if everyone who's listening to it will particularly think it's better because of this. And it specifically has to do with how this party of players reacts to the story as it's happening. So the interesting thing about actual play is the players are an audience to the story and they are participants in the story. The difference between actual play storytelling and improv storytelling is, as I said earlier, the improv storytellers are constantly remaining in character, but the actual play storytellers, they're playing a character, so they're themselves, they're referred to as themselves, like the GM will specifically call out, "Hey Lou, what do you think about this?" rather than saying, "Hey Ursulon, what do you think about this?" So that means basically this player entity within the framework of the format is becoming this fractured identity. You have the person playing a game and having fun. You have the person striving to be a good actor and a good character and a good storyteller contributing to the larger story. You have the person reacting as an audience member, which is slightly different than a player because audience members are other players in the party who will react to things that are happening to their allies. They're not playing that character, they're reacting to the things happening to that character or what that character is doing, and they're reacting in exactly the same way that we, the audience, would react. They're laughing, they're gasping, they're getting excited, they're cheering them on.
There is space in my hiding spot for two if you would wish to join me.
You are asking me to go up there and stay next to your mud-covered body.
It would be an honor to make sure that you are safe here in the dark forest at night. And also, you are extremely visible and ruining my trap.
Oh, for a second there, Rue sort of like collapses a little bit.
Insight check to notice.
That's a 14.
Hub.
Mm-hmm.
They looked a little crestfallen to not be held in a certain esteem by you in that moment.
And it's fascinating. You see this person occupying a role where they're cheering on a character in a scene. That character isn't supposed to hear the people cheering them on.
Yes, but it's little. You're not there.
It's not him, it's a pigeon.
It's true. You're right. You're right, Sam.
There's a metagaming pigeon in this.
Bonus action.
The audience isn't supposed to influence the actor when you're looking at theater and when you're looking at film and when you're looking at television. The idea of an audience reaction literally dictating the further actions of the character would be bizarre. But that's what improv is. Improv is about reacting to the moment, and the audience becomes a participant in that interaction. You see the same thing on a stage where people are just doing comedy improv and things like that, where the improv actors are asking for audience responses in order to define the story.
Video interview was with like a automated system. It was a weird system. It had like, for example, it would say like, you have 30 seconds to read the question and then a minute to record your answer.
They're making you interview yourself? That is... Wait, no wonder the fucking youth of America is disillusioned with the employment process. Please read the following question.
Can you hear me?
Please read the following question.
If you can hear me, you're talking now, so there's no reason for me to read the question.
Please read the following question.
Why do I want to be a photographer? Oh.
You now have 5 seconds to answer.
I'm not sure I do. Okay.
But that's like more of a direct intervention, whereas when you look in actual play, where all of the party members are sort of these audience participants who are influencing the events simply through their reaction to the events, it becomes like a lot more intimate because it's about the relationship between those people at the table. They're audience members, and then the other fractured thing that they are is they're friends and they care about each other. And even in shows where you have guest players who might not be as intimately involved with other people on the screen, you immediately find that they create these relationships through the act of playing together. They reach a level of intimacy and trust that you generally only get when people have been in like a performance rehearsing something for like a long period of time. You can see in actual plays where you have guest players come in that these guests immediately get chemistry with everybody else at the table because the nature of how actual play involves people in the stories, especially with really good GMs like Abria and Brennan, it opens up these doors within the players and actors' minds of I am safe, I'm comfortable, I have this innate connection to what we're all doing here, and we can immediately sort of help each other tell these stories that sometimes have really intimate or vulnerable emotional moments.
And also, like, real talk, like, your character and my character had the most, like, there was a deep emotional connection.
Oh, 100%.
That I felt with you as an actor. The characters were so deeply connected. I am so glad that we formed the relationship
like
that they
bestie,
have now.
Exactly. Like vibes. Yeah,
exactly. Bestie vibes.
So the players are players, they're characters, they're actors, they're audience members, they're a group of friends. They're doing so many things at the same time, and there's so many layers you can peel out constantly in your reaction to it, because as you're listening to it, you're like vacillating as an audience member between appreciating them in each of these roles or appreciating the confluence of these roles and how that confluence can affect each story beat in each scene. So all of that captures the nature of actual play creators as actors, but there's also a lot to be said about the role of game master in actual plays, a sort of confluence of director and storyteller. Rather than talking about that topic broadly, I want to dig into a specific quality of Brennan's approach that stands out to me. In the games he runs, Brennan has a pretty intense focus on the internal psychology of characters in the story. So Brennan is very often seeking out moments of intense emotional resonance for the characters and intense heightened emotion in reaction to every beat as it's happening. He doesn't just let things pass by. He always tries to find an opportunity in each scene to draw attention to some specific interaction, some specific line of dialogue, some specific emotional reaction to something that's happening. And he's always trying to dive into like the character's headspace. How are you thinking? How are you feeling? What is it that you feel in reaction to this, and then encouraging them to use those feelings to inform the actions that play out.
What is Ursulon thinking and what is Ursulon feeling as you behold this? And how does your mind even process what this could be?
I think Ursulon is like immediately forgets the mushroom and Narian and the chase He's desperately just trying to connect it to anything he's ever experienced, and like you said, the closest thing is that dance of water, but the fact that it moves with these men as they move, that it's not still, that they are of it, that they are of this play of light. Ursulon wants to see it more and get closer to it.
Brennan does a thing that I don't really see, I don't think any other actual play runners that I'm aware of do, where he uses the rules of D&D sometimes to force players to think about their conscious processes. So he'll do things like roll an insight check against yourself to see if you believe yourself when you're lying to yourself.
I don't want to lose that job, and I don't want to lose all of my clearance badges and stuff, so I can't tell her off, but there's nothing there. I think there's nothing there.
A profound emptiness colder than the void fills the pit of your stomach. Make an insight check and a deception check against yourself.
Insight. 13 plus 6. That's 19. Deception. 12.
I think on that insight check, two things happen. Number one, a delusion that has been crumbling in your head for a long time finally goes away. When you graduated from business school, even though you knew there was going to be dirty work, part of you believed in the meritocracy. Part of you believed, like, yeah, you got to be cutthroat, but if you are, you get to the top of the top of the top. Not really.
No.
Brennan is very clearly preoccupied with the internal states of characters and how those internal states turn into external reactions and external actions that drive the story forwards. And I specifically really love this internal reflection focus of storytelling because it ends up feeling more like a novel than a TV show or a movie can, because you have this whole confluence of what the players are that I brought up earlier, the player, the character, the audience. When you can explore the internal mental processes of characters live, improvisationally, and immediately, there's a thing that's happening that's not even the same as narration in a book. It's not the same as stream of consciousness. It's not the same as if you suddenly hear a character's thoughts in a movie or a TV show or a play. It's not the same as a soliloquy when a character's saying what they're thinking and feeling to the audience. This specific exploration of internal character processes is where player as audience member and player as character sort of meet at this unique intersection. Whenever players are posed these intense, dramatic internal questions by Brennan, they're often such pointed questions that they force the players to reflect on the emotional state in a way that's not necessarily the same as, like, if you were to ask me how I'm feeling when I'm having a sad day, and I were to sit there and give you exposition about how I feel, that would be telling you what I think about my own internal mental state. But when a storyteller asks another storyteller what they're thinking and feeling at this specific emotional beat in an actual play, this different thing is happening where the player has to consider not a self-aware understanding of the emotional state, but what the emotional state is in its raw form. Like, what are the immediate raw thoughts and feelings that I can see a character would have in this situation? But that doesn't mean the character is self-aware about those feelings. That doesn't even mean the character would know how to express or externalize those feelings. So you're doing this interesting writing performance thing that happens off screen more often in television and film or theater, where, you know, the director asks and prompts the actor to consider, like, what is your internal emotional state? Actors have to do this sort of thing all the time in their careers. But when you highlight that moment of sort of director almost, that's kind of what Brennan is being here, to actor, and you make it improvisational in the moment, you like cannot come back from whatever you say here. This is going to propel the story forwards. This is going to lead somewhere that none of us can expect. You get this, again, huge confluence of like layers of creativity, layers of storytelling that you really can't get anywhere else. So I'm explaining this sort of theory of the format of what it means to participate in actual play because what these 4 people specifically bring to the table is this incredibly intense excitement about the nature of what they're doing. They're very self-aware of what it means to tell a story as a group in this format. They're very self-aware of the format itself. They've been participating in this format for years. They're hyper aware of how the format works because many of them have participated in so many of these shows that they have like a broad spectrum understanding of what actual play is as a medium. And you can tell in their performances and you can tell in how they talk out of character specifically to each other, how aware they are of what it is they're making because they've done it before. They've already done a beautiful, fun version of this. And just like us, the audience, and just like that feeling I was sort of, I think, describing at the beginning of this that I have when I find a really good new actual play show like this, they know this is going to be good. They know it's good. They're experiencing that it's good as it's happening.
Under and over and through all ways, for there is no part, no parcel of mortal affairs that is not touched by the presence of the Spirit, and yet the Spirit does extend beyond. How deep does the forest get, Lou?
Oh, it goes deep.
And then they also have this future sight of knowing everything good happening now is only like a little step in the road of how good this is going to continue to be. But I would also argue this group of people is hyper aware of what quality storytelling is. So, like I've said, one of the core elements of actual plays is how the party can react to the story as it's happening. The kind of energy each party member brings to that kind of reaction is obviously going to have an effect on the overall tone of the story, because those reactions implicitly also impact everyone who's performing as the reactions are happening. So one of the main ways this specific group of people enjoys reacting, and I think you can see this in all the shows they've been in, both together and apart, is to react in a way that's very celebratory of the story as a story. That means reacting to a story beat not just in and of itself, like saying, oh, this sad thing that just happened is really sad, but also reacting to the nature of it, like, holy crap, the way you did that specific sad moment perfectly aligns to providing my character the tools to further their story in some compelling way. They're always not literally saying things like that, but you can very often hear it in their reactions even when they're not commenting on it. And when just one person in a group brings that kind of awareness and intensity to the reactionary interplay between audience member and player and character within the actual play space, I think it kind of forces everyone to start thinking the same way and having similar reactions. You do see the same thing a lot in all quality actual plays. It's the nature of the thing for the party to react to powerful story moments and have really strong reverence for those moments. But what I think is interesting about this specific group and the energy that they're forming around those intense reactions is when really epic story beats happen in Worlds Beyond Number.
Ursulon's going to move on all fours and just move closer to Curran and put a hand or paw onto his plate.
You touch this plate and the gold, it is a feeling like nothing you've ever felt. This is as cool as moonlight and harder than stone, and it captures all of the light of the sun with none of its heat. You have never seen a magic like this. And you see your face reflected in its shining surface.
When something like immediately has tonal, thematic, metaphorical resonance, or there's this specific dramatic beat that's really going to push forwards the character's progression or really hits the nail on the head in terms of the emotions that that character is experiencing and the drama that's happening.
Fuck off, dude.
We are
You know what you're doing.
dying
You know what you're doing.
You
know
don't
what-
understand.
You know what you're doing.
Please.
I see my face reflected in it.
Oh my god.
Oh my
I'm screaming and
god. Oh, that's f***ed up, bro. Bro, that's f***ed up. Oh. Oh.
Overcome with
Oh.
understand.
Oh. That's crazy.
This party of people have these really intense celebratory reactions where they're like, damn, of course that's what you did. Of course that's the beat you're hitting. Of course this is the cool thing that's gonna happen next. And they're so thrilled and just like purely deeply invested in the nature of good storytelling. They celebrate good storytelling so much that it forces all of them to constantly be hyper aware of the good storytelling as it's happening. So my point is, there's something really special, I think, happening here with this specific group of players and their immense and specific attachment to being aware of, as a group, the nature of good storytelling, both as audience and as creators. There's this kind of exciting energy that's happening with this group that is just constantly simmering in everything they say and do.
That's where we're going to stop.
And that makes it really hard to not feel the same way as they do. I feel their excitement, and I was already really excited to listen to this show, but having it come through and reflected back at me constantly and how they react to the story as it's unfolding, it's almost like what a laugh track is doing in a staged sitcom where it's helping you know how to feel in reaction to something. But because those reactions are coming from the creators themselves, it lends you this ability to like get into this multi-layered headspace of the people that you're witnessing. And to me, as like an emotionally motivated person in how I care about stories and how I care about people, I find it frankly intoxicating and I can't get enough of it. And I just absolutely love what these guys are doing. After editing all of this, I realized that there's a lot of innately parasocial elements to enjoying this kind of show. It was like impossible. It didn't even cross my mind to describe what this group is doing without also commenting on who they appear to be as people and storytelling and social decisions that they make, rather than just assessing the work as like a work of writing or a movie or a TV show. And that's because who they appear to be is literally part of the work. I think I described that a lot. Probably the best form of this essay would have included a bunch of research or even interviews with the creators and have them put their intent into words themselves. But this is my first little humble video. To analyze this type of thing, I can't escape the parasocial analysis. The medium links the audience to observe the projected mental states of the creators more than any scripted media can. It rides this weird line between like live streaming and scripted content creators. As someone who analyzes both media and people around me pretty neurotically, it's impossible for me not to fall into a trap of analyzing the personalities and social dynamics in actual play groups. And there's a bunch of things you could say about these groups of people that I wouldn't say in a video because it would feel like it's crossing some kind of weird line psychoanalyzing a group of friends. Also, lastly, on this subject, it has to be said that when you see open, loving, vulnerable, and sincere friendships be a major part of a public-facing piece of media, it's, well, for one, just a good thing for society and the people who choose to enjoy that kind of media. Like, so many of these playgroups are really open about how much they care about each other when they bring their social energy to the show, how much they love each other.
All right, let's do it.
I love you all so much.
Love you so much.
Do I love you? I do.
Look, I want to work for it.
Do I love you?
Rhetorical question gonna knock me off balance, but then we got the answer we were looking for.
Yeah.
Thank
That's
God.
Which is objectively inviting a kind of parasocial emotion in the equation for the audience. I probably could have had like a whole section in this video about why these shows might appeal to some people on those grounds or might actually not appeal to some people on those grounds, but there are already so many video essays and interviews about parasociality, and I don't really want to talk about it very much. I just needed this last caveat about it. So I think ultimately, as I'm improvisationally writing this review into a camera, I'm realizing the thing to me that is the most compelling about actual play work is it's doing so many things simultaneously within the creative space of storytelling, performing, collaborative creativity, improvisation, drama, comedy, that it's like constantly intensely enriching for me. So I was telling my friends today after I finished the 3rd episode of all 3 previews, this show is putting me into this very specific emotional state very rapidly and very frequently. Every 2 minutes at least, I feel this full body high where I'm like, oh my God, this is so beautiful. This is so fascinating. This is so compelling. This is so interesting. That was such an interesting reaction. That was such an interesting way to say that or to think about that. And I'm feeling this way like constantly while I'm listening. There are very few works of media that make me feel an intense beauty reaction or reverence reaction. There's lots of aesthetic philosopher terms for like what it means to feel something in reaction to something beautiful or sublime. There are very few works of media that make me feel that rapidly every few minutes. A lot of really good works of media are really building up to that feeling over sometimes, 30 minutes at a time, sometimes 10 minutes, sometimes 5 minutes. The way different media is trying to make you feel things and the rate at which it's doing so depends a lot on the media. But Worlds Beyond Number, and often Dimension 20 as well, puts me into this like sublime beauty state so frequently that it's honestly, in this show specifically, kind of overwhelming. And I'll admit, I feel like I sound like I'm being really weird or obsessive to have that kind of emotional reaction to something, which is why I felt the need to like externalize all of this and try to turn it into formal language, because to have that level of reaction to something to me is very rare. I consume a lot of media and I'm constantly seeking the greatest sense of beauty I can feel from the things other people are creating. And I would also say when I'm in this unofficial fan Discord of Worlds Beyond Number, I see a lot of people having kind of, I think, similar emotionally intense reactions to just how good this show is. I feel like I'm feeling this sort of such an intense reaction to something that it makes me wonder, am I just being a fanboy? Am I just being like irrationally excited because I happen to care about Brennan and I happen to care about Dimension 20 and I happen to just really like these creators already? Under scrutiny, for me and my value systems, no, I don't think I'm having like a irrational fanboy reaction to just like, I like something, it's cool. I think when I like break down the formal pieces of what makes Worlds Beyond Number remarkable, I see this evidence that these creators are taking this like new approach to the medium, and they're doing so with a sort of mindfulness and awareness of what they're doing that feeds into the audience and feeds into their own creative process in a way that's really remarkable and interesting. So, when I sat down to record all of that, my plan was to just get a quick few thoughts about Worlds Beyond Number out into a camera and throw something rough into the void of YouTube and social media and build up to some other stuff that I've been working on. It's not thoroughly researched in the way that other actual essays I'm working on are. There are probably many quotes and formal discussions and interviews about actual plays that I could have pulled into this if I wrote it properly like my other essays, but after I shot all of that and I composed all of it, I realized just how much I had to say about this subject, and I felt like it was valid to share as is, though it also needed a lot of content and context. So I entered into a fevered state of editing it for weeks to follow, spent 100 hours editing it, feeling the need to strike while the iron is hot, fueled by just, this immense passion for this medium that I have. As you can probably conclude from this massive thing, I've been obsessed with actual plays for like years. Professionally, I'm a video game designer. Unprofessionally, I'm a writer, and I'm also a media addict, like it's a job sometimes. Making a video essay is working a bunch of creative muscles that I kind of let atrophy as I've specialized in game design specifically, despite also considering myself a writer and liking writing a lot. But like I said at the start, I don't want to do reviews. I think being a critic and also a professional creative is probably risky and weird. But saying a bunch of positive things about some beautiful products feels safe, probably. These shows are like lifeblood to me due to how I specifically engage with media and stories, and obviously this show is one of my personal favorites already. Abria came into the fan Discord to say after recording some new stuff a couple weeks ago, however good you think this storytelling is, my god, it's better. Their celebration of story appeals directly to me so much, and I think it does to a lot of fans of the show, and I think the show will get a bunch more fans because of this sort of thing. If you stuck around for this whole video and you don't like these creators and you think other actual play shows are obviously better, you might be incensed to how much I say these guys are doing unique or cool or remarkable things or whatever, but everything I pulled out here can be seen to some degree in other shows. I think I acknowledge that throughout the essay. I'll just reiterate that it's the specific focus of this group, the specific focus they have as storytellers and as creators that stands out to me in my value systems, and I think is going to stand out to a lot of fans. Whew. So, whether you already like actual play media, or you are just considering getting into it, or this sort of thing is just never going to be for you, but you were curious what we're all losing our minds over, I hope this video provided a compelling analysis of actual plays and this new show. Future content on this channel probably won't be about actual plays, but if you like long-winded video essays about how media works and why it works that way, especially regarding storytelling and video games, click the subscribe button. Lastly, thanks to the crew of Worlds Beyond Number for making such a cool show. And also, you know, thanks to everyone who makes awesome actual play content. This medium is amazing, and it just keeps getting better and offering more, and I'm so happy it can provide so much immersive content as a major part of my life. It is so enriching. All right, that's it. Be kind.